So Cowherd made a list of the top 10 quarterback head coach duos in the NFL. Now, you notice he talks about the top 10, but the graphic behind him the whole time is Jimmy and the Niners logo. For those of you who've been paying close attention, like John and I have, because it's our business and actually has benefited our business, the national media has figured out that the 49ers are pretty good business, John. Now, you say, well, yeah, they went to the Super Bowl. Yeah, and it woke up a monster.
Well, you know who knows that better than anyone? 3 letters. FOX. Fox has been riding them, I don't know, since they paid John Madden the equivalent of like $40 million a year in 92. What did they ride? The Cowboys, the Packers, and the Niners.
Yeah.
They print cash. The Niners own the West Coast. The Cowboys own a lot of the country. Same with the Packers, right? So you get the entire West Coast. You get the Midwest and the East Coast kind of too, because the Packers, definitely the Cowboys have people that hate them. The Niners, more lovable brand, not much hate, but when they're good, you ride them. When they're bad, you just pray to God they get good again from a media standpoint.
All right, so let's check out this list and decide where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong. I actually like a lot of this list, John. These are his ranks, and he ranked I'll go 10 to 1 for those of you just listening on the podcast. Cliff and Kyler.
It's all Russell.
Russell and Pete. Yeah, that was my note. It's all Russell. Deshaun Watson and Bob. That's number 8. Goff and McVay at 7. Lamar Jackson and Harbaugh at 6. Brady and Bruce Arians at 5. Shanahan and Jimmy at 4. Breeze and Sean Payton at 3. Wentz and Doug Peterson at 2. Mahomes and Andy at 1. So he's got Jimmy and Shanahan at number 4 here on the QB head coach duos.
And luckily with the top 5, now we haven't seen number 5 yet. All these guys are play callers, right? So it's like they literally parallel each other. You know, because like John Harbaugh and Lamar, yeah, good coach, sweet quarterback, but they don't really have that much to do with each other. Same with Pete and Russell, like you said.
Right.
Even though I get the list, I think when you're talking like, who would you pick to win a big game right now? Jimmy G, Kyle Shanahan, or Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson? I think, listen, Doug Peterson has won big games. Carson Wentz really hasn't. You know, he won some games last year down the stretch. I don't know against the NFC East, and I'm as big of a Carson Wentz fan as you'll find. I would struggle based on the information we have. Now, independently, impressive, right?
That's the key.
I'd say combined, the number 1 is the easiest number 1 going right now. It's a no-brainer, right? Just Andy Mahomes. You'd probably argue that over the resume, I'd put 3 at number 2, Breeze and Peyton. I'd have Jimmy G and Kyle over Wentz and Doug because I've seen them win big games, guy. I have not seen these two yet. While Doug's won big games, and I think Doug's one of the best play callers in the league. Love Carson Wentz's talent, but we haven't seen it come together when it's all mattered yet. I've seen Jimmy G and Kyle win a game on the road, week 17. That guy, if he doesn't get stopped right at the 6-inch line, the Niners are the fucking 5 seed. And Seattle wouldn't have been the 1. I think they would have been the 2 or whatever. But that was a big game. I don't know. People forget that. That week 17, big game.
Yeah. I agree with you. I hate to agree with you, but we both looked at this list independently without sharing ahead of time what we thought, and I'm with you. Here's the thing. If there was a quarterback draft, who'd go first, Wentz or Jimmy, right now?
Carson.
Yeah. If there was a coach draft, who'd go first, Shanahan or Peterson?
Kyle.
But I think that one would be closer than Jimmy and Wentz. Do you agree? I think Shanahan and Doug Peterson. Now, I think Shanahan, we both agree he's at the top. But I think in terms of just knowing he's a high level, no one really asks any questions, I think they are both collectively, if we combined their equity in the league, it would be higher than Wentz and Garoppolo's.
Way higher.
In fact, both of them have higher equity than their coaches, than their quarterbacks, even though Wentz would go before Garoppolo, but Shanahan would go before Peterson.
Which is weird, right? Because I think we're almost underselling Doug. He won a fucking Super Bowl.
That's the point.
Right.
It's like he is on – we think of him very highly.
Yes.
But I think Shanahan is the strongest brand of the 4 of them.
I agree.
And
I think both those two duos, like if you told me they're like the NFC Championship next year's Eagles, Niners, I think they just kind of solidify themselves as just the 2 guys behind Andy Mahomes. Because the other guys, The problem with Breeze and Brady, old. And the problem, back to what we said about Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh, what does John Harbaugh do if, God forbid, Greg Roman gets a head coaching job? Like, that's a huge red flag. Deshaun Bill O'Brien, I actually was reading this thing the other day. I didn't even realize this. Bill O'Brien has this younger guy that calls plays sometimes. Like, it's kind of a weird situation. The Pete and Russell, it's like, I mean, does Pete Carroll know the offense? I'm not even trying to be an asshole. It's just he tells him to run. He doesn't tell him, like, run Y stick, Rover 7, jet drop, Yeah. Cliff, I'm sorry. I love Kyler as a prospect. They can't sniff this list.
You're saying you got like McCarthy and Dak or something?
LaFleur
and how about LaFleur and Rodgers?
I'd put that. I'd put Belichick and Stidham on this list before that combo. Like that.
Well, we're actually going to get to some other rankings, but I do think it's important because not everything's black and white. Like you and I both, I think, liked Wentz before a lot of people liked him. Partly because maybe we just thought it'd be fun if he was good because then it'd make the Browns look bad. But we were on the Wentz train pretty early.
Because his talent was obvious.
His talent was, that's right. That said, we also, I think, sometimes are a little hesitant with whether or not he will fully realize what we thought he could be. When healthy, he was an MVP candidate. So that's the backdrop for me to say this. The last 3 years, albeit he's only started 16 games once, and that was last year, his touchdowns to interceptions, 2017 when he started 13 games, John, 33 touchdowns and 7 picks. That was the MVP year before he got hurt. 2 years ago, 11 games, was still 11 games. He was 21 touchdowns and 7 interceptions.
Guy, he's a playmaker.
So
I think we've undersold him a little bit.
Yes,
now, even
he has a 38 touchdown, 11 interception year in him coming, right? As long as he's healthy and he's got Doug Peterson and his team's good.
If I was doing a basketball analogy, like the last year and a half, what Giannis kind of became, it was like, oh my God. I think Carson has a oh my God in him. You said 33, 38 and
11.
Guy, if they could get consistent production from wide receivers staying healthy, you could convince me like a 45 touchdown year where he just runs away with the MVP Mahomes style. I think it could just be stupid because his playmaking ability is Mahomes like, right? He's what everyone.
So we're making the case to have him and Doug ahead of Shanahan and Jimmy.
Yeah, I think if you just based it on Doug, listen, love Kyle Shanahan. I think a lot of teams would pick if you just gave him a draft, would take Kyle over Doug. Doug would sit here and look you in the face and go, "Well, I won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. I outcoached Bill Belichick." Right? So if you wanted to put
would
those
Jeffrey
guys
Lurie trade him for Kyle?
No, he just gave him an extension. No,
he wouldn't. He handles Philly media very well, right?
Yeah,
he's part of the job.
He's a big time coach.
So
fun. I think Jimmy. But I think back to the Eagles and Niners, kind of could just cement themselves as like we're on this list moving forward in the top 3 or 4 for a long time.
Yeah,
and I think the biggest question marks, in a weird way, are the 2 quarterbacks. Can Wentz stay healthy, and can Jimmy keep getting better?
2 of the top 5 on this list, legit, Brady and Breeze. Now, whether it's this year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, they'll be cycling out here soon. Yeah. And those spots will be available. Now, the number 1 spot looks locked up in perpetuity.
When Brady retires, I'll count me in. Like we'll see when he does, because it's like 43
or 2 years or 3 years. But even if Breeze, even if this is Breeze's last year, then that opens up a spot potentially.
Like there is a chance that Drew Brees calls a Sunday Night Football game for Tom Brady, the player, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
that is on the table.
Yeah, while Phillip Rivers is coaching a high school football team that night.
Yeah.
Or maybe not that night, but that weekend. So, the other one I would say, I think Goff, McVay, I like seeing them at 7. They've taken a lot of hits. We'll get to Adam Shine's list of divisional quarterbacks. I think
they could either fall off or jump right back in.
Yeah, I think where they are is where they will be. I mean, it's like Goff gets talked about sometimes like he didn't throw 32 touchdowns and 12 picks 2 years ago. Now, last year was a step backwards, no doubt. But, like, let's say he takes 16 interceptions from last season and cuts that down to 10 and goes, instead of 22 touchdowns, which he had last year, 26. So he's 26 and 10. If I told you that's what he is, isn't this about where he would belong anyway?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's an element with Jared Goff, who's like the younger version kind of Matt Ryan. Now, I'm not saying that Jared Goff's ever going to win an MVP. When you kind of have a weird season, and I think Rivers has always talked about this when he cried about, like, remember his final press conference, like, I've truly never cared about stats. I just did whatever I thought it took to win. So it's like sometimes the games when I throw 3 picks, like, it didn't bother. I couldn't. It was just I was trying to make a play. You're going to throw some picks when you lose 7 or 8 games because you're going to be down in those games trying to come back. So I think sometimes the context of the picks, right? Some of those are terrible picks. Like if you throw 15 picks in a year, there are going to be probably you could siphon 3 sets out. The 5 that are just Jameis Winston level atrocious. The 5 that some timing issues or just an NFL level pick, and then the 5 that fourth quarter you're down 10 points, you got to fucking push the envelope, right? I just broke it down pretty easily.
Yeah, I think the simplest way to break it down is Phillip Rivers is the NFL's career leader in interceptions thrown at 4:45 Pacific time on a Sunday.
When they're down 10 points with 6 minutes left.
We've seen the same Chargers game 8 times a year.
But think how many
picks
the
Chargers were just down 17. How are they down 7 now?
Yeah, and they've had some comeback wins, right?
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
We think.
No, you don't think so?
My just in general level for the Hall of Fame, it's one of those things that I still like. I have really high standards. Like
I know, but wouldn't you say, without even getting into stats, Phillip Rivers has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for every year that he's been in the league, just about?
No, there were some stretches where I don't think he was top 5. I think
I didn't say top 5. I just said when you say, hey, who are the best quarterbacks in the NFL, you said Phillip Rivers almost every year.
And to me, there would only be, like, over the last decade, like 3 no-brainers. It'd be like Peyton, Tom, Rodgers, Breeze. And then we'd argue, like, if we were in a room, like, we'd have a conversation about Ben. Now, he'd ultimately get in. Eli, same thing. I mean, Phillip, same thing. Like, I think we need to have a meeting about this. That's the group I think he's in, right?
Okay. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, it's not like he stacked up, 10-win seasons every single year. It certainly didn't.
No, and not all his fault.
But again, I'm just my first.
I'm a Hall of really good guy, and I think there's nothing wrong with being in that group.
And I think he's better than Hall of really good. But the fact that we're having a conversation about it means that there's a conversation about it. So
yeah, my point is there's just a conversation to be had.
That's fair.
He's not like a lock.